welcome to Learning for Love, Lessons for Life. I'm really excited that you're joining me today. We are talking about writing, resilience, and making time for what matters. I have two very special guests on today. You're going to meet two individuals who have quite the expertise when it comes to writing, and they also have, of course, their own lived experiences when it comes to being in the sandwich generation and trying to figure out how to fit everything in when it comes to caring for others while also making sure that they take care of themselves. So I'm really thrilled to welcome, first of all, I should mention their names. I have Leanne Beattie, who's going to join me later on, and Jennifer MacLeod, who's going to start us off. So Jennifer, I'd love to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for being here. And I would love to give a little introduction of how you and I know each other, if that's okay.
Beautiful. Thank you.
So it's important, I think, for everybody to know that Jennifer and I have been best friends since grade 1. So we have quite a history. And so some of the stories that she's going to share, I'm going to be very familiar with. And this is, Jen, I'll just speak to you. You've been inspirational in my life because you've always been so passionate and really followed your dreams. And it's gotten you to where you are today. So on that note, I wonder if you could share just a little bit so people know who you are and
Sure.
what this journey looks like for you to bring us up to speed relating to the topic at hand.
Fantastic. Thank you. I am a longtime London resident and have basically spent my whole life here. And I'm a mother of 3 beautiful daughters. Their ages are 11 and twins who are 9. I'm also an educator, so I have taught for almost 20 years. And more recently, in the last couple of years, I've published 5 novels. So I would describe myself obviously as an avid reader and a lover of writing. And in addition to that, through my work teaching, I'm an advocate for young people. So I think that's sort of a quick summary.
That's an awesome summary.
Yeah.
What really, I know it hasn't been an easy road for you, but a couple of things that really come up for me that I find so moving, I guess, that really influence me is how close you are with all of your family members. So your parents and your children, who you have a wonderful close bond with, as well as the fact that you teach. You somehow make time for like really genuine not visits, but like genuine time with your children. And then you also somehow remarkably I have the books behind me. I don't know if people can see them, but you've written 5 books. And when you're parenting on your own, I'm not sure how you fit all that in. So I don't know if you can kind of share a little bit about maybe your routines or how you fit it all in. What does that look like?
It's busy, but when I say that, I don't mean that in a negative way at all. It's full. So one thing that if I can mention, just the writing took a huge backseat. I'm going to be perfectly honest. When I had my family, and I was always a lover of reading and writing. You would never have found me without a book as a kid, and I loved writing. But as you know, the job takes over and the family takes over, despite how rewarding that can be, your own passions sometimes fall by the wayside. So how have I accomplished that? I was trying to think of something small I could do to change my daily routine to fit it in. And I think you think sometimes it's impossible because you think all or nothing. You know, I either have days on end to write, and if I don't have that, then I won't at all. And so what I just made a small change. It was around 2017, so 3 years ago. I decided when I get the kids tucked in to bed at night, I'll set 1 hour aside. And I stuck to it. And so suddenly that 1 hour became my own time to fulfill something that was a love of mine for many years, but like I said, not utilized. And right. 1 hour, amazing things happened. You can produce a lot and express a lot. And often that 1 hour became 2 or 3, and I was staying up quite late at night, but it was the commitment. And I compare it to people working out at the gym or going for a walk or gardening. This was what I was passionate about, and it's made such a difference.
Absolutely. It's I think this is going to be a theme as we go through the different episodes, but it sounds like it's really been you prioritizing what really matters to you and making sure that
Mhm.
you have time to fit it in. So,
Yeah.
cutting out whatever else. I don't know what did that look like before this new routine started? What do
Um,
you think you got rid of? What did you remove in order to have time for your writing?
Probably more just, I don't want to call it aimless time, but that time that's just wasted and before you know it, it's gone.
Right?
More that, because by putting that 1 hour into writing or even researching or editing or whatever that looks like,
Yeah.
maybe that was watching television shows or, or reading. Now it's divided up into more, it's just more structured.
Right.
Uh, and it's not a huge commitment, so it doesn't feel onerous.
Yeah.
And then the joy that it's brought, it keeps it going because you want to see the results of that. So there are a few days where I don't do that, but generally I would say for about 3 years now I've devoted at least an hour every night to something to do with the craft,
That's
whatever that
awesome.
is. Yeah.
And I love the fact that you mentioned how when you get started, it's like working out. And I think exercise, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I don't think there's a replacement. I think it's important really to take care of our physical
Mm-hmm.
health. But what you're saying is that by starting, my comparison is that with physical exercise, a lot of time people don't want to, and it's so hard to
Yes.
even just get started. Where when you make it a habit and it's automatic,
Yeah.
you set that time aside, and whether you feel like it or not, you then have the opportunity to decide, okay, this is working, this is what I'm going to do, or
Mm-hmm.
okay, you know what, I put this time aside and it's not happening today,
Yes.
but at least you have that carved out.
Yeah. And I think later Leanne can also talk to this too, but writing isn't just writing. There's so many facets of it. So on those nights when the words just aren't flowing, maybe you're researching or editing or doing something else that you're still in the craft. And so that's all necessary stuff too, right? To get to the final product. So it does, though. It becomes its own motivation. The fact that something's been achieved and you feel so good about it,
Yeah.
then you want to spend that time the next day as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And the other piece, I guess, to relate it to people who aren't, I mean, not everybody's going to be a writer or an
Mhm.
author, but people like me, I love to write. I don't consider myself an author, but I love to journal. I love, to be creative in that way. Maybe
Mhm.
not necessarily in a book. Maybe someday it will be, but I think
Yeah,
I think that where I'm going with that is that writing in itself, I feel like, can be therapeutic, if not cathartic in ways. What do you
for
feel like
sure.
when you write?
Oh, for sure, for sure. It's been quite a journey. I would say that the first book that I wrote, almost the entire purpose behind that was catharsis. And I had feelings that hadn't been expressed and experiences that had never been shared beyond a small circle. So it was a bit of risk taking, and it was um, being willing, I guess, to kind of sort of expose some of those really personal thoughts. But once that happened, the healing, the catharsis also happened. And I would argue that it allowed me to then explore other kinds of writing. I
Ah,
feel because those feelings were purged and kind of celebrated, I guess, in a way.
yeah,
Um, and I also received feedback from people who also felt those feelings.
right.
So then that became the motivation to explore other sides of my personality and not just the really hard or painful ones. So I've also now explored romance and comedy,
Yeah,
and I'm kind of challenging myself with each new project to try some other kind of genre.
that's awesome. I hope it's okay that I mentioned some of the titles of your books. Is that
Sure,
okay with you?
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I have them behind me, but the first one that you wrote that you're talking about, that is pretty deep, and it's I felt very bad saying to Jen, for me, I have a hard time because it's so real. and so deep that I had a hard time reading it. Having said that, it's beautifully written, and it was that book that you said took you years to write and
Mhm.
to process through a lot of those emotions because it's a heavy subject, and that's
Yes.
abalone. And then you went on with your kind of the romantic melodramas as you describe them with
Yeah.
Lady Ellen and it's the trilogy. And now you're going to be writing more about, I think, London history and bringing in your genealogy. Is that correct?
Yes. So in that trilogy you mentioned, the final one is New London, and it's all based in London, Ontario in the 1800s. And then the genealogy research I did, it's become a romantic comedy, as sort of a time travel. It's meant to be funny and light, and just one of those kind of distracting kind of reads. So it really runs the whole gamut in terms of emotions, and everybody needs a different type of book. That's the whole point. And sometimes authors need that too. We
Absolutely.
sometimes
Absolutely.
like one thing, but sometimes we like to explore many
Yeah.
things. So
Yeah. Well, I think it just shows how you've kind of processed and grown through that experience of writing. So thank you so much. And I'm hoping that you'll stick around, Jen, while I bring Leanne
absolutely.
on.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Leanne, I'm hoping that you and I can maybe chat a little bit about your experience, your personal and professional experience about kind of where you are right now, how you relate to writing and resiliency and the journey that got you to where you are currently.
Hi, well, thank you, and I'm really happy to be here. My journey is been a troubled one in the fact that I started writing as a teen, did not have a happy home life, and it was a way of processing what was going on, kind of making good out of a bad situation. So I wrote a lot of angsty poetry, and I ended up a few years ago writing a novel that deals with grief. My father died when I was 18, and it was a way of the catharsis and just, using that negativity in a creative way and, learning from it and being able to move on. So now I write happier things, but the initial push to get writing was a way of dealing with emotions. And there's actually been a lot of studies done around that sort of writing that proves that it works. In 95, there was a psychologist called Dr. James Pennebaker who did a study where people who had lived through traumatic events, could be PTSD, some sort of family trauma, and if they wrote for 20 minutes a day for only 3 days, but they wrote and spewed out all their emotions, they could move on from the experience. And the way they figure it works is that normally, something happens and then you start ruminating around it and it just keeps going through your head and going through your head and you never deal with it and it's just always there. And by writing it down, and by hand is preferred because you have a more brain body connection that way, to write it down, to talk about the nitty gritty, dirty, painful parts, your brain kind of knits it together and creates a story. It's like, okay, this happened and that happened and it made me feel this, and now I feel this. And then once you're done all that, your brain can say, oh, I dealt with that. Okay, I'm going to put that on the shelf, so to speak, and then you can move on with life. And so, my first writing was very autobiographical, but now it's not. It's more just pure fiction. There's always parts of me that pop up. I can always see myself in my main characters or some theme. I think for me, loss is going to be my recurring theme in whatever I write, and how the character deals with it and moves on.
What a wonderful way to share with us the lessons on how effective writing can be, the actual act of writing, the fact that we take pen to paper and take that time to focus in on expressing our thoughts, expressing our emotions, and getting rid of it almost. It's there. Of course, we still feel that way, but it's a good way to process our emotions and just then move on, which it sounds like both of you have experienced. What I find really informative is also just being in the moment and being able to even write an autobiography, which you mentioned. Is that the same as a memoir?
A memoir tends to, I would say, it focuses on a certain time period and
Okay.
creates a story around a certain time period. An autobiography, I think, is a more all-encompassing of your whole life, whereas a memoir is like a section of it that you're dealing with. That's how I interpret it anyway. So
Okay.
in my novel, there's autobiographical things like I dealt with death at a young age, and so my character did as well.
Nice.
It wasn't exactly the same as my life, but the feelings I had, the things I did to get over my grief, the character did. And it's funny because in my novel, before I had learned about that Panna Baker study, in my novel, she starts to journal as a way of dealing with her grief and to move past it. And it was intuitive. Like I needed to do that. She needed to do that. Everybody can do that
Yeah.
to deal with their emotions. So it was neat to see that that was a real thing.
Right. Right. I found that on a personal level, I found that over the years, I'm on, I don't know, maybe my 14th journal now, because I've been writing just, a page or two since I was a kid. And I find that the way I write now is much different intentionally, I think, because of the fact that I know now how I can change my writing to also help me change my thoughts, if that makes sense. So before I knew about, writing to kind of process emotions, I think I just did it naturally because it's something I enjoyed and something that, yeah, that I just did. But I would just write about the day, or maybe write about things that concerned me or annoyed me as a kid, but also wrote in the way that, oh, I don't want other people to find it, and I still get asked that to this day. But what would you do if somebody found, your journal? But now my writing is much different, and I've really come to terms with what I write. And I intentionally focus on, I do more of gratitude writing now, where it's focusing on what I am grateful for. So the gratitude journals, and I know journaling is, I think, a new, I don't want to say a fad, I hope it sticks around, but I think there's different types of writing that people can do too that help us move through our emotions. Do you have anything to share about that? Any experience?
The one thing that got me started with writing, especially in a group setting, is I started being part of a writers group probably 25 years ago. And it was working through the book Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg. And you're given a writing prompt, and then you just free write for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, whatever comes up. And oftentimes it's, your personal stuff. And it's just a way of kind of clearing out the cobwebs
Yeah.
so that you can move on to something else. Julia Cameron, who has The Artist Way, has a similar thing where she talks about doing the morning pages every morning. So it's like 3 pages, longhand writing, where you're just stream of consciousness, whatever's going on in your psyche, and then you just don't have to deal with that anymore. You can start, you can go to work, you can deal with your children, you can start your creative project,
Yeah.
but you've kind of cleared out all the stuff that's weighing you down. And oftentimes we don't know what we think about something until we write it down.
Yeah.
And I kind of, oh, that's how I felt about that.
Right.
Well, that's why I was upset with whoever. And it's really interesting to see how powerful our minds are, and we don't realize it.
Yeah.
And we make these connections that are so healing. But if you were just to, go about your daily life, you would never have made that connection. So, the self awareness is really great that you get out of it.
Yeah, good points. Good points. You're giving your mind the space really to kind of process through these things and
Yeah.
allow it to make those connections that, like you're mentioning, you might not have otherwise connected.
I feel it's when I do the morning pages, it's kind of like my way of doing meditation.
Okay.
So instead of sitting in the mat and having your thoughts go past and not really paying attention, this is like just, the stream of consciousness and just emptying yourself out and then just having those revelations is really, really powerful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Leanne. I'm really hoping that you'll join me when I bring Jen back on the line. I have some questions for both of you that I'm hoping that you'll answer. Thank you.
Good.
So Jen, I'm going to bring you back on. And I have a question that I'm wondering, maybe you can kind of take turns with this one, but I wonder what inspires you, like in the large picture going forward, because we're not going to stop having our challenges. We're not going to stop having the people that we care for in our lives, whether you're, still active, full-time working, or if you're retired. What inspires you to keep going and having that resiliency to move through some of the more challenging situations that we do in life? Leanne,
I have an idea.
okay.
My mantra in life is life's too short to be miserable. And my kids, I've heard it mirrored back at me, so I know they were listening. They're all adults now, but they listened.
Yeah.
And for me, that means, if something's not working, do something about it. So whether you're not happy with your job, you've got relationship problems, you don't like, something that's going on in your life, only you can change it.
Yeah.
So we only have one life that we know of, and it's up to us to take ownership of our happiness and make it our responsibility. And, not say, well, my marriage is horrible, it's my husband's fault. It's like, well, you've got a duty to yourself to somehow make that better. If you're not happy with work, you've got a duty to yourself to make it better, whether, get a better attitude at the job you're at or find something else. But, life's too short to be miserable.
Good, excellent response. Remembering that we always have a choice, right? There's always a choice. And the fact that, sometimes it's fear. Well, most of the time it's fear that holds us back from doing something, because it takes a lot of courage to move through a situation or change a situation that you're in, like the topics you're mentioning. And knowing that there's so much that we've already been through in life. And the only way we really learn and grow is by continuing to change and make those tough choices when needed, and figuring out what the best answer is for us. Yeah. Jen, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
For me, it was a moment, I think, a couple years before I started, like I said, getting back into writing and scheduling it. It was something that my brother, I have a brother who's older by 3 years, and I'll give a shout out to something that he said. It stuck with me. He was referring to my 3 daughters. He said, you're teaching them how to be women.
Yeah.
So that societal pressure that is often placed on caregivers to sacrifice everything for that role. I think his message was that you're important too, because they're watching you.
That's
and
right.
If you're, never prioritizing anything or making those choices, like you said, sometimes the very difficult ones, or living in fear, they're seeing that. And that really stuck with me. I have that almost as a quote that I would from any other author, and it's been life changing. They inspire me. You asked, what inspires you? They do, because they're incredibly proud, and they're now writing books of their own and creating websites. And to see that in young people, that you can, with something very small, make a change in your own life, and then it can be mentored. I think that's sort of my philosophy of life. It's changed my life.
I thank you. I completely agree. And I find that I think anybody who has children can relate to the fact that it doesn't matter what you say. They're not going to necessarily always listen to the words that you say if you're not acting that way yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the time, well, all of the time, I think kids learn from our actions and what we're actually doing from day to day. So, they're seeing you write, your girls are seeing you write and seeing what you're doing and wanting to do that too. And I found too, when I was making changes and kind of developing some healthier habits, there were little changes that I noticed around our home too. Not because I tried to make them change, but because it happened because I had changed, So it's interesting to see it that way. And it all boils down, in my opinion, to taking care of ourselves and doing what makes us joyful and fulfilled, because that's what they need to see. And that's how I want my kids to see growing up and having lives of their own. Yeah. Well, this has been excellent. Thank you so much to both of you. You've both shared so much, not only about writing in itself, but how it's affected the both of you, as well as your professional experiences, teaching our young ones, connecting with our families. And Leanne, I really appreciate the research also that you shared with us, because it helps us to have ideas on, where to go next, some of these authors that we could look into. And Jen, for also sharing your writings, and you both have so much to share. So I really appreciate everything you've given today.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So that was our episode for Learning for Love, Lessons for Life. I'm really hoping you enjoyed this as much as I did. The lessons around writing, the effect of writing in itself, as well as how we can be resilient, developing some of these healthier habits, and making time for ourselves in the ways that matter most to us. So prioritizing those things that fulfill us intrinsically. So thank you so much, and I look forward to the next time I get to see you. Take care.